Alright, Diablo players, let's talk about it. Armor, resistances, and life. How do you survive in the hardest difficulty of the game? This is going to be a complete guide to surviving and not essentially getting one-shotted in the game. So for starters, one of the newer changes is we now have these tormented difficulties. And as you go up, you're going to have negative armor and negative resistances applied to your character. And you need to make sure that you're in that specific difficulty, and you need to view your character and make sure that in that difficulty you have that amount, because, well, you might have joined your friend's party and that might have changed like the world tier, and that's really important to go ahead and check out. So make sure that when you are checking for these numbers that we're going to be mentioning, that you are also able to go ahead and actually check that you're in the correct difficulty. Another thing that I want to mention in this game, there are certain mechanics that will pretty much one-shot you, regardless of how strong your character is. Once you build up these tormented stacks, you're going to be taking a massive amount of damage. There are several different bosses, whether you're doing Lilith and you have the blood waves, you go out of bounds, you're doing the raids where like this imminent doom happens and you're just going to get one-shotted. So for the most part, this will help you, but there are some mechanics where I'm just going to have to say you need to move your character out of the way. You're meant to not take that damage, as it's nearly impossible. Once the imminent doom is in there in the raids, you can't just get more HP or more armor to survive. So one other tip is to make sure that your items are specifically 800 item power. That will also give you flat more armor based on the item itself, but it will also boost up the numerical values of the stats. Pretty much what it comes down to is getting that ancestral piece of gear to get that greater affix to actually apply it and actually give you maybe even a bonus to armor, maximum resistances, or the life. Now it depends on the piece of gear, but for the most part, ideally you try to get everything to be 800 item power. It's mainly most important in specifically the weapons, but the extra item power will definitely help out in terms of numerical stats. So let's tackle these one by one. So for starters, we're going to go over armor. So what specific uniques, what other aspects, where can we actually get armor in the game? So for starters, there is a unique that gives you an incredible amount of armor. That is the Harlequin Crest, and it actually recently just got buffed. But nonetheless, this gives you crazy amounts of armor. It gives you great survivability, giving you a massive amount of life, cooldown reduction. It pretty much is the trick of all trades. This thing is super excellent. But right now with SpiritBorn, the Ebiwaka helmet is actually really good too, because it lets you convert and also gives you damage reduction. But if you're looking for raw armor, which there are a lot of builds even on SpiritBorn because you can get more damage based on more armor, a Harlequin Crest can still be a very good item. I wanted this video, by the way, to be for all classes, although what we're going to look at is a little bit more into the SpiritBorn because, let's be honest, everyone and their grandma is playing this class this season. So Harlequin Crest is just excellent in the helmet category, but you can also just get armor in that category as well. Another thing to mention is aspect. And the aspect of the Juggernaut is really great. Now there is technically a downside where you can get a bunch of armor, but our evade cooldown has increased cooldown. So there is kind of a double-edged sword with this one, but for the most part, it's just going to easily solve it. There's also something called Disobedience, but that one kind of has to ramp up. And you could stack all of these, but just as a heads up, with armor, you only want to hit 1,000. Anything past 1,000, unless you're doing some sort of crazy build, it's not going to go ahead and give you any more of a benefit. Again, unless it's a very specific build. We're just talking about, like, for damage reduction, 85%, that's going to be at 1,000. And then you can also get armor in your glove category. There are a lot of other things for a lot of different classes that could apply armor. This is like unyielding hits over here. So this could also help out. Depending on the class you're playing, there are a lot of times aspects that are in the defensive category that could apply to armor or even resistances or other survival mechanics. And then also, I mentioned already, Disobedience, but you can also get this in your pants category. So in the pants category, you can get armor. You can throw in this defensive aspect over here and you get a lot of armor. And then on top of that, you can temper in any of the defensive slots. So that's going to be in the helmet, the chest piece, and the pants. And in the amulet, you can throw on a temper to actually give you even more armor. So you can get so much armor. In fact, it's really easy just to cap on armor with specifically the jewelry, which we'll get into in a second. Also on boots, you can also get armor. There's a lot of stuff that can have to do with like dodge or block that can actually kind of tie in, since we're talking about survivability. Even though we're mainly talking about armor right now, movement speed actually kind of keeps you up as well. If you're able to move out of the way from a giant explosion, which is kind of what you need to do in a Diablo. And I totally get it. Sometimes visual clutter is a thing. Like, look how many numbers are on screen right now where you simply can't even see that explosion that goes on. But having extra movement speed will kind of tie into survivability as well. But getting armor, it can be a thing on your boots as well. And then another important key thing that it ties into survivability, and this is kind of something that a lot of people may not expect. If you get extra attack speed and your chance for your skill to cast twice, if you have anything that can activate on hit, that can be a freeze, a stun, whatever, that is tied also into survivability as well. And that is something that a lot of people may not consider, but that will, again, keep you up a little bit more. But getting max life, which we'll talk about more so in the life department, but don't skip out on the maximum life in your weapon. A lot of times, this is a key stat that a lot of people miss out on, and that's what essentially is causing them to die, because you get a massive amount, especially if it's on a two-hander. And then in your amulet, you can also get extra armor. You can see this one over here. There's also an aspect called Bruisers that will give it to you. Now, different aspects are specifically to specific classes, so not every class has the same one, but there are some that do have overlap. Like Juggernaut, Disobedience, you can run on every single one. And then in the ring category, it's another thing where a lot of people do skip out on. It's specifically getting maximum life in your rings. That will really help out. And then also in the rune category, you can run, the first one doesn't really matter. It depends on your build, what you're using to activate it, but certain ones that will really help out with survivability. This kind of ties into life, but the Zal will actually give you a lot of maximum life, and there are a lot of people running that one. And there's also Mott over here. That can be really good for survivability, giving you that Dark Shroud. You can also run the Druid's Bulwark. There's tons of different ones, but these are the ones that I could recommend. The Druid Bulwark, you can also run Mott over here. Again, the Dark Shroud. The reason why I like this one, it kind of lingers on, and, you know, obviously if you're playing Rogue, this is actually pretty good, because then you can put more ranks into it, and it can get even better. Now, for armor specifically, in most cases, you don't want to do this, but if you're really trying to push for that extra number, if you get strength on most classes, that will apply. Different stats do different things on the different classes, but int and strength, those ones are the ones that will give you, like, resistances will be on intelligence, and then strength will give you armor. And then the most important one that I think a lot of people pretty much really utilize is the skulls. Skulls, you throw them in your jewelry, and then you get 240 armor per. And it's really easy to max on armor once you go ahead and get that rolling. Now, that's going to mainly cover it for armor, but now we're going to get into resistances. So what are the good ways to go ahead and cap out on your resistances? So for starters, you can get resistances in your helmet. You can also get another resistance. There's all resistance, and then there's like one specific one. You don't get to roll both of them in unless it's like some special thing. For the most part, you're only going to either get all resistance or one of the resistances. I just put this one here to show you guys that you can get either one, okay? Again, you cannot get all resistances and one resistance on the exact same item, because it simply will not actually roll that way. But again, in the helmet category, you can get one of the resistances there. And then if you temper on the resistance, you could, in theory, if it's a rolled all resistance and then you temper on one resistance, that's the only way that you could get like two different sets of resistances. So where you get like cold res and then you temper on a different one. But as far as tempering, there is no all resistances. This item right here that I'm showing could not actually exist in the game. It either will have at the top fire resistance or resistance to all elements, and then you can temper on whatever you want. You can basically get two fire resistances if you wanted to, but you can't get two fire res and one all resistances. Now, the next thing that could actually help out quite a bit is actually Tyrael's Might. A lot of times in the previous seasons, we would always go to this, but right now with SpiritBorn and the Shroud of False Death, this could actually be an item that you can sacrifice to get way more damage. So Tyrael's Might is excellent for specifically the reason of giving you so much damage reduction. Basically, it helps out with a massive amount of resistances, and then also giving you maximum resistance to all elements. So for resistances, you want to try to get to 70 if possible. Armor is actually more important than resistances, but if you want to cap out on resistances, get 70 and you'll be good to go. Now, if you want to go beyond that and get to the 85 cap, well, then you're going to need to get Tyrael's or Tassus of the Dawning Sky, or there's technically another amulet that gives you it, but that's pretty bad. But for the most part, Tyrael's is going to be your go-to to pretty much solve your resistance problems for most builds, and it gives you a massive amount of damage reduction, plus it gives you movement speed, which is also kind of a good way to survive as well. And then you can also get resistances on your gloves. So keep in mind, again, you cannot get shadow resistance and resistance to all elements. It's just put here to let you guys know you can either get all resistance or shadow or fire or just one other one. If you're wondering what's the best suggestion, it kind of depends on your rolls, because sometimes you get an item that's so godly, but like you cannot roll two different things on it, and you're like, well, I'll just keep one of the other resistances and it's not all resistance, and then you end up putting one specific colored gem into your ring or your amulet, and you kind of solve resistances by tagging each one. It's kind of up to you on how you want to tackle it. Sometimes it's the luck of the draw, but ideally on gloves, though, just as a heads up, most of the time you want like attack speed, you want crit strike chance. Those are the two stats that are really good, and then also like your core skills. So you have like 3 stats that are so key on the gloves. I wouldn't really want to try to get resistances on the gloves, but hey, there are certain builds where like you cannot fit your resistances in other areas. So in order to cap out, hey, you're gonna have to do it, right? Then next up, Taskers of the Dawning Sky is unique that will give you a lot of resistances as well. In fact, while you are leveling, this is a great item while you are trying to progress into the Tormented 4 difficulty. To cap on resistances is great, but I actually really like it for specifically the movement speed. There also is this bonus where you can get like extra plus up to 15% maximum resistance, which at the highest roll, that's the maximum amount you can get. That effect is actually not the greatest because you still have to take that first instance of damage, and then it can only apply to one damage type at a time, which absolutely makes this item not the greatest. But if you are fighting a very specific boss, maybe in the future when we get more raids where like, let's say we get like some poison boss, but for the most part, even the raids, which is supposed to be kind of like the end game content, you don't really need this like for the maximum resistance. Tyrael's already kind of does it, but this can be an okay thing. If you really need to cap resistances, the numerical stats on this are definitely not bad at all. Now, moving on to something that is actually good. Now, keep in mind, you can get resistances on pants like regular ones, and you can temper on them as well. But I just wanted to mention some uniques here in the video too, just because some of them are actually pretty good, again, when you are in your process of leveling. And then also Ragnaros Wake and Yen's Blessing. These basically have the same thing as far as it goes, giving you that massive amount of resistance to all elements. Getting these greater affixes actually can hold some value, and there are people that do look for these, because I've been selling those over on the Diablo trade website. And Ragnaros Wake and Yen's Blessing both have value specifically because of that. But on top of that, you can also get cooldown reduction with Ragnaros Wake, as well as getting non-physical damage. Can be pretty big for sorcerers to get all these like bonuses on the Paragon. Plus it gives you movement speed, which we've already talked about. And then on the amulet, again, you can temper on one resistance. You can have it roll with either shadow resistance, fire resistance, cold, one element, or you just get resistances to all. And then on your rings, you can also get all resistances, or again, one of the resistances. And then on the implicit, it will have one specific resistance. There is a strange thing with Ring of the Starry Skies where it actually rolls with resistance to all elements 2 times, which actually makes it really, really good. And this is why this can actually be something if you wanted to actually use it to really bump up your resistances. But it's also one of the top tier rings in the game for a lot of builds. The only exception is like SpiritBorn, because SpiritBorn, you have very strict things that you can play in the game right now, but this is still a very, very awesome item. It's just great, giving you a massive amounts of attack speed, crit, and then core skills is also really good, and gives you pretty much one of the highest numerical stacks in the game with an X50 over there. Great stuff. And if you really want to get more resistances, if you're playing, let's say, the Necromancer or the Sork, well, you're gonna run Topazes anyway, so you get even more, because Int gives you resistances. But if you're playing another class, it could still apply, but again, I would probably not recommend it. However, diamonds I could actually recommend. And another thing I wanted to mention for specifically resistances and armor, this applies to all classes, even though I know we're checking out the SpiritBorn here. There's a lot of resistance nodes as well as armor nodes that you can grab, and these will add up. I would say the armor ones are a little bit mediocre because it gives you like 15. It's a very small number, whereas like the resistance ones can be a little bit better because it can be 3%, and then if you reach the bonus, which you ideally want to, you will get a additional amount. So that could be something to go ahead and consider as well, and that will actually give you even more resistances and armor. And this can apply to the skill tree. I just didn't want to make this video going over every single class, but there are certain things like the Druid has extra resistances, and there's a lot of other ones for different classes to either give you damage reduction or resistances or armor on the skill tree. Now, moving into maximum life over here. So there are other things that can help out with life a lot. Like you can get like a chance to get some sort of a heal when X happens. I know with Dark Shroud, there's when Dark Shroud gets removed on the skill tree, there's something that gives you life. But in the helmet, you can get maximum life. You can also roll on the defensive temper maximum life as well. There's also the brand new mythic armor that gives you crazy amounts of HP. If you get that greater affix and masterworked, wow, it's going to be excellent. In fact, a lot of times, if you really need to min-max on your resistances or armor, as you start tempering, that actually starts to add up. When you hit the temper and you start masterworking, it really helps out. But if you really want to get even more life, yeah, this can definitely be something to consider as well. And then another thing that's supposed to help you prevent from getting one-shot, this is created in a previous season. It doesn't really see any play, but if you really are trying to prevent getting one-shotted, Endurant Fate technically does this. It's whenever you would be damaged for like a big chunk of your life, 40% of your maximum life at once, it instead is distributed over the next 2 seconds, and it's reduced by, you can get up to 30% reduction over there, and it also technically has maximum life on it, and has extra healing received, so if you're doing any like life on hit or regen per second or something like that, it can kind of help out. But for the most part, the life per second and life on hit, those are two stats are absolutely garbage in the game. I don't even know why they are rolled that way. Like, you get such low numerical stats, so don't get any of those in the game. But there are certain things that can heal for a percent of your life, whether that is like undying. That is actually another aspect that can technically give you some heals as well. Also, the Crowded Sage, this one's excellent for any class that already has dodge built in. This could be even better because it's just going to give you 8% extra dodge. You can also temper on dodge or get this on a roll, and then this starts getting a lot better because you have basically maybe like a 30% chance to take 0 damage, because that's what dodge does, and then it will also restore a big portion of your life. 25% life is pretty massive. And then we also can get maximum life in our boots, and I already talked about, but movement speed is also key for surviving. And then always on your weapons, guys, you want to get, usually it's going to be your main stat, and then you want maximum life, and then you can get crit damage, you can get vulnerable damage. That's genuinely something that is on all builds. And then also, in your amulet, you can also get maximum life. You can also temper on your maximum life. And then on your rings, do not skip out on getting maximum life on your rings. A lot of times, it's crit strike chance, attack speed, and then life. That's kind of like the go-to. There are some builds that you may want to start scaling crit, but that is another option for it. But anyways, that's going to go ahead and wrap things up as far as getting your survivability up and making your characters way tankier, and how you can basically tank most of the stuff in the game. Again, there are certain exceptions where you're just not really meant to go outside of the bounds on Lilith and expect to survive. Just like in Path of Exile, just like in any action RPG, there are mechanics that sometimes it's a learning process and you're going to have to die. Or like the Imminent Doom, if you guys are doing the raids, if that bar goes all the way up, it's GG. So there's no, I tanked it. Maybe if you put the Sorceress on and you pop a Flame Shield, you can survive some mechanics, like, of course, like the Blood Waves or certain mechanics that you're supposed to just get one-shotted by. But for the most part, yeah, these are supposed to be things that are dodged. Anyways, that's going to wrap things up. If you guys enjoyed the video, drop a like on it. And if you're new here, hit subscribe, turn on the bell if you guys would like to see more guides and other content in the future. And I'll see you guys on the next video. Peace out.